The underlying, we've had this discussion, so we should pass this information on to the listeners. What actually is the mechanism that causes that? As you get older, you seemingly lose range, you get stiffer in terms of your tissue capability to stretch and the compliance. What's actually happening at your tissue? Like, why is, and this will bring us back to why it improves, because we can talk about the chronic adaptations and what's happening, but why do you actually get stiffer? What's actually happening at a tissue level?
Well, most of it is still centrally mediated.
Okay.
So most of this still has to do with a reduction in your stretch tolerance.
So the good thing there that straight away highlights to me, and I think straight away it means that even if you get particularly stiff as you get older, you can regain a lot of your movement.
Because remember, when you, going back to our analogy of thinking of why you can't do the front splits, because it's got to do with your lack of stretch tolerance. If you attempted to do that, the thing that's limiting you is as you start to stretch out those stretch receptors, it sends a signal to go,
this is dangerous. You're going to damage tissue.
Well, and it's probably even a better way to put it is this is unfamiliar territory.
Yes. Okay.
Because I think it's too fear-mongering to say that this is dangerous, because it's actually not dangerous. But
yeah, I know what you mean.
The brain will perhaps look at it as like, I'm not used to this. I'm unfamiliar with this. Yeah. So you get contraction of muscle. So that's essentially what's limiting your range of movement.
Yeah.
That's actually problematic in itself. And it's interesting to note that we actually experience this all the time in athletic endeavors, because as you start to sprint, change direction, do a large range of movement in the gym, as you start to just stretch the tissue, particularly when it's contracting, you're creating a high amount of tension within the system. So if your body is unfamiliar with the amount of tension it's experiencing, it may start to alter the contraction or the neuromuscular patterns that your system's creating to complete that.
So, it's like an inhibitory feedback loop.
Absolutely. And this is something that anecdotally I've seen a lot, and particularly looking at athletes who are have quite extensive training history, particularly in resistance training, where they're reaching plateaus in their development and they've seen quite large improvements in, say, their 1RM from adding stretching into their training protocol. And I think a lot of that happens because of that phenomenon. Yep. Because all of a sudden, you're not necessarily making the muscle stronger, so to speak. You're actually not changing anything peripherally. But what you are changing is your brain's perception of going, okay, I'm familiar with this tension that you're creating. I don't have to create those inhibitory signals. And this is where I think you see a lot of improvement too, from an athletic standpoint, is not just simply the available range that you have, which may be important from a biomechanical standpoint to be able to achieve the certain angles that you need for for instance, something like sprinting, but more allowing your body to achieve those positions without getting to that threshold of going, well, hang on, I'm not used to this
range.
And that varies a lot, because what's also very well known is you'll see changes in what that point is based on how much that person slept, had they actually warmed up properly, hydration, what their current training program looks like, and whether they're feeling some level of fatigue. So that's something that we can manipulate by applying stretching and making sure that, if nothing else, that their stretch tolerance stays at that level. Because one of the issues you face with most of the training modalities athletes do is it actually reduces your stretch tolerance.
Yep.
And that's the issue that you have, where it's going to get to a certain point over time where your stretch tolerance is so low that you'll start to get a lot more of those inhibitory signals being sent.
That's what you're saying, like it's something we lose over time rather than something you necessarily gain.